Heading into every NHL season, there are multiple prospects out there that need to start proving themselves in the NHL, or else their careers might be in peril. And every single year, we see a few of those prospects not work out with their NHL clubs and get sent back down to the AHL again. So today we're going to be breaking down the NHL prospects that needed to prove themselves and just haven't been able to, and where their careers are going to go next. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we cover the prospects that could be in trouble, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content and prospect content just like this all throughout the year. Now, the first prospect I want to talk about here that was a pretty brutal blow to see go back to the AHL, and that is Kevin Korchinski of the Chicago Blackhawks. Not really much of a surprise if you were paying attention, but still for a 7th overall pick at this stage to be pretty far away from an NHL spot is pretty disappointing. The biggest concern to me when it comes to Korchinski is that it's not like he was blocked by numerous premium NHL defensemen that were always going to be played above him. There was a pretty clear spot for Korchinski to come in and solidify himself as an NHL defender, but Wyatt Kaiser ended up signing, which took a spot there on the left side, and then you had Matt Grzelcyk, who the Blackhawks added as a PTO guy. They later signed because he was playing so well, and quite frankly, much better than Korchinski. Really, up until the final preseason game for Chicago, we were still seeing Korchinski having to battle with his pretty glaring weaknesses, being very allergic to physical contact, being somebody that was very turnover prone, very consistently, and just not being able to show the offense and the power play ability to make up for it. And the thing is, too, he's been leapfrogged by a lot of Chicago's younger Ds. Sam Rinzel is a big one, somebody that was drafted in the same exact first round that has clearly been above what Korchinski is showing. Even at Artem Levshinov, somebody that has his issues, sure, but very clearly is able to bring some talent and potential that Chicago's willing to take a bet on. But you already have two pretty big-time rookies into the lineup, and adding a player like Korchinski, a younger defenseman that really hasn't shown that he's NHL ready, is, I think, pushing it a bit. And the worst thing I can say about this situation is that it wasn't a surprise that Korchinski was sent down to the AHL. It was actually my expectation. And even though it's not the worst thing in the world that a 21-year-old defenseman is still developing in the best way and back in the AHL, it's a 7th overall pick, and I think at this point you would expect more, especially for somebody that was playing in the NHL right after his draft year. Even though they were both sent down, the fact that Nolan Allen has a bit more of an NHL future with Chicago right now, I think is telling for how concerning the situation has become. Now let's move on to another one that I think was a pretty big concern when he was eventually sent down, but another one that wasn't much of a surprise, in Brennan Othmann of the New York Rangers, or I guess now the Hartford Wolfpack. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship when it comes to Brennan Othmann over the years, somebody that I did enjoy for quite a while, but I thought 16th overall was a bit rich. It was something that was actually going up and down, because after his draft year, he actually seemed to look like a really interesting pick. The year after he was drafted, after only playing in Switzerland, he had 97 points, 50 goals in 66 OHL games, and the stocks were at an all-time high. That, plus a pretty solid World Juniors, did put him on the map, but I think since then he's kind of stagnated in his play. He did have a pretty solid first year in the AHL, getting 49 points in 67 games, but you can see last year, alternating between the AHL and the NHL, I just didn't really think did him any good. Wow, I'm genuinely shocked. A Rangers forward prospect who hasn't properly developed in their system. There's a theme here, but I can't quite grasp it. In Othmann's case, though, I thought there was a pretty good chance that this year would have been the season that he would get there. I mean, he's going to be turning 23 in January, and I think the clock starts to tick there, especially as a top 20 pick. He's somebody that I always thought would have been at least a decent bottom 6, more physical type of player, but it just doesn't quite seem like he's brought the intensity and especially the offense that you want to see out of a player like him. I think most of the players we'll talk about today are in need of a change of scenery, but I think Othmann the most, man. I do not trust this Rangers team with anybody below the age of 25. Now on to the Buffalo Sabres, who had a pair of prospects who weren't able to make the NHL roster. One is decently concerning, the other is very alarming. Let's start with the decently concerning one, though, and that is Noah Ostlund, another top pick. You go back to the 2022 NHL draft, and I think Ostlund's kind of trajectory has been pretty solid up to this point, but I think he's also one that could really use a change of scenery, mostly because I don't think there's much of a role for him long term. Ostlund, I think, is best as a centerman, and you see over the years what he's been able to accomplish. It's been very solid production all throughout, going from the Hockey Allsvenskan to the SHL, where he got decent production there, 23 points in 38 games. And then this last year, playing a full season of the AHL, he got 36 points, 19 goals in 45 games. Nothing spectacular, but I think for his age group, it was about as much as he was expected to do. But especially as a 16th overall pick, especially with the type of hands that Ostlund has, I think you'd expect a little bit more at this point in his career. But I think what most concerns me is not that he was sent down to the AHL, because I think that was the most likely scenario, because Buffalo already had their center situation figured out. That's kind of the thing. Buffalo kind of has their center situation figured out. That's what concerns me the most in terms of Ostlund's future. Even if Tage Thompson is a wing long-term, you still have Josh Norris, Yuri Kulich, Ryan McLeod, and you're going to have players like Konsta Helenius, who I think are maybe more projectable onto a middle six. Players like Anton Wahlberg, for example, that could be centers as well on a bottom six. And I just don't think there's really enough space for Ostlund. Yes, sure, he could be a wing as well, but I think his game is most suited down the middle. It's where he plays his best hockey, in my opinion. And to have him as a wing, it could work, but I just think it's kind of going against the identity he's built up over the years. But he's one of those prospects, man, that just has so much talent, so much skill, but isn't quite at that level to be in the top six, to get reliable power play time, and also isn't as defensively responsible of a player to have in your bottom six reliably and really bet on him. There's going to be some icky defensive moments if you play him no matter what, and there just isn't the role to shelter him as of now. Maybe that is able to open up next year, and hey, maybe that's opening up and there's an injury throughout the top six this season. Maybe a player like Ostlund is the next call up there, but I just have my doubts in terms of his long-term future in Buffalo. Moving on to a prospect that I think has a lot more alarm bells for his NHL career, and that is Zach Jones, the former third-round pick by the New York Rangers, and somebody that, again, isn't really surprising that he wasn't able to win a consistent NHL job, but the fact he's down in the AHL and isn't even an extra D, I think is a bit rough, considering that's kind of been his role over the last couple of years. Now, I think Jones has always kind of been a bit hyped for what his level has been at. He's always been a really good offensive quarterback on the power play especially, and put up solid numbers for UMass in the NCAA and decent numbers in the AHL, but never really dominated in terms of the point production, which for a smaller defenseman that is a lot more offensively oriented, that's kind of what you need to prove the most. Especially if you're going to have some of the defensive mistakes that Jones does bring in his game, you kind of need to have some point production, especially if you're going to be playing on the bottom pair, and Jones has never really been able to prove himself in that role. He's always had good moments and maybe some good passes here and there that lead to goals, but it's never really been strung together consistently. This is another one like Korchinski where there was a pretty interesting open role for him to take advantage of, but just wasn't really able to do so. You have another younger defenseman in Ryan Johnson, who is another one that kind of needed to show what he was made of this year, and he's taken that third pair spot, which I think he's a little bit more, in terms of the NHL player style, a little bit better suited for that, and I don't really blame the Sabres for this decision. On to another younger offensive defenseman who is another alum of UMass and also connected to the New York Rangers in Scott Morrow, who I think was somebody that was a bit disappointing not being able to win an NHL job. It was honestly my expectation that he'd be playing on that third pair to start the year with the Rangers, and that just did not happen. I thought he started fine in the preseason, but then as it went on, became a bit of an issue in terms of the defensive workload and how much that was kind of overstimulating him, it felt. But I think Morrow is somebody that has always had really interesting offensive potential, but has always been a bit of a project, and that it still is true today, even if he is playing NHL games in the past with Carolina. He's somebody that did look good at points, but again, there was just too many times where he was getting out-muscled, outworked defensively, and I think for a lot of teams out there, especially in the contending status again, to have that on your third pair isn't the most desirable thing in the world. He'll be starting in the AHL this next year, and he's only played one AHL season, so hopefully we can see him be even more dominant than he was last year for Chicago. He was great, getting 39 points and 13 goals in 52 games. So I still think there is an NHL future potentially, but he's, again, one of those offensive defensemen that is harder to rely upon, and I think really needs to start showing what he is capable of here soon. It's hard because you're never going to be playing power play 1 over an Adam Fox or anything, but I think there was a role for him to play power play 2, and that just never came to pass. It was never really the reality either with the way he was playing, but I think he's another one kind of like Ostlund that really needs to dominate in the AHL this next year to hopefully earn a call-up in the future. Now, to end off today's video, we have a couple Montreal Canadiens prospects who find themselves on the outside looking in. The first one is Sean Farrell, who was a former 4th rounder by the Montreal Canadiens back in 2020, and this one is a bit of a disappointment considering how much I enjoyed watching him in the NCAA and how interesting of a bottom sixer I thought he could become, but the progression in the pros has been there in the AHL, just not when it's mattered most. You can see in 2024, played 47 games for Laval. Last year in 2025, got 67, and again, puts up some pretty good production, especially in the goal scoring department. But I don't really blame Montreal for not having him as the first call-up or somebody that's playing a bunch of NHL games, because whenever he's gotten the opportunity, especially in training camps, he really hasn't seized the day. He's just looked very pedestrian, and maybe Farrell is somebody in the pros that kind of needs the power play ability, kind of needs to be a little bit more sheltered to make things work. But I thought Farrell was, especially in his last NCAA season, really looking a lot more physically competent, looked a lot more of a two-way player, somebody that could play potentially out of bottom six, but we just haven't seen that transition happen yet. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if it's going to happen. As a smaller forward who's about to turn 24 years old, I just don't think he's shown enough up to this point to be worthy of an NHL job long term. Plus, he was on waivers. Nobody claimed him either, so it seems like other NHL teams agree with that. It's a shame, but the NCAA production is never really a true guarantee, especially in the conference that Farrell was at. It's kind of up and down in terms of the quality of play, so it was always kind of a gamble, but still as a fourth-round pick, I think he's shown some good things considering it. Another forward who was drafted in the mid-rounds who was looking really good and then stopped progressing as much as we wanted, and that was Joshua Waugh, who was a fifth-round pick, 150th overall, and at the time, it was a very interesting one. There were some concerns over work ethic, and it seemed like for a bit that was looking a little bit better, and then kind of got a little bit worse, and today, he's kind of in no man's land in Montreal's organization. He was somebody that I was pretty high on back in 2022, but also after 2023, what we saw in the QMJHL, he was just absolutely dominant. He got 24 points in the playoffs, 99 points in the regular season, and then the next year, what we saw, I thought was pretty great. He played 23 NHL games for the Habs, got 9 points. I thought looked really good in those games, even if he was kind of in a more of a sheltered role there. In the AHL, looked pretty solid for his first year, 32 points in 41 games. Some defensive issues for sure, but I thought I think the thinking was that he was going to end up getting just a little bit better, even if the defensive game was never going to be the biggest part of his game. But you can see, since then, it's not really been at the greatest level. He's still had the similar amount of production in the playoffs last year for a while, looked pretty good getting 10 points in 13 games, but I think he was somebody that was really needing to prove himself this last training camp and just wasn't able to. Looked better at a couple of points, but I'm splitting hairs there. He just didn't look like an NHL player, and I think the biggest thing for Watt is that his role and what I saw him kind of maybe having to be at the NHL level has kind of been surpassed by Florian Xhekaj, who was another mid-round pick by the Habs, somebody that has come in and really impressed, not just in the prospect tournament, but also in the preseason with his really opportunistic scoring and just the energy that he brings. And as much as Watt can be good at points, the offense can really be there, the energy has always kind of been the problem, and at least consistently game to game, it being there. So if he's going to be in a bottom six role, I'd kind of prefer a Xhekaj that you don't really need to worry about when you're sending over the bench. In Waugh's case, though, it's always a bit of a question mark, and when he's not scoring, he's just really not worth a spot. So he's what I'm concerned about when it comes to the future, just because the role isn't quite there, and we haven't quite seen the progression year to year that we wanted to see out of him. There is still time for him to win a job, of course. He is still decently young, but I think this year is where the clock really starts to get ticking, if he's going to be a future NHLer. But those are some of the NHL prospects that could potentially be in trouble, guys that I just wanted to talk about, give some updates on, and we'll see what happens in their careers in the future. I'm rooting for all these guys, though, because right now is the put up or shut up time, and hopefully they're able to put up some good numbers. But if you guys enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. Of course, comment down below your thoughts on all of the prospects you talked about today. Which ones are you more concerned with? Which ones are you less concerned with? I'd love to know your thoughts down below on that. And a big shout out, of course, to the channel members. Their names will be all up on the screen. I appreciate the support a heck of a ton. If you guys want to become a member to be part of the member polls, you get shout outs in every single video and new weekly exclusive member videos, just hit the join button, or you can hit the link in the description down below, and it's just a couple bucks a month. It's a great way to support the channel, though, and I appreciate it so much. Make sure you guys click up here if you want some more hockey prospect talk, and share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day, because the NHL season is almost here, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.